Friday the 12th of July, rise and shine. And here in the studios, we count down to Sunday's big game. We've got Jay Harris. Hi, Jay.
Good morning.
Also, Liam Tharme.
Hello.
Lovely to see you, Liam. On the big screen, Dom Fifield. Dom.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Also on the way, there's Pol Ballús coming up. He's in Germany on how the build-up is going for the Spanish. And very shortly, we'll be hearing from Daniel Storey as well. He's on his way to Berlin as we speak. But, you know, a couple of days out as we record from the final. How are you feeling, Liam?
Pretty good. Yeah. Enjoyed the games increasingly from an England perspective. So
from that very high bar.
Yeah. Well, it was probably hard to not peak relative to some of the group stage performances, but you know, peaking is always good at this stage of a tournament.
Absolutely. Where are you going to be watching the final, Jay?
Just in the pub, cross my road with about 14, 15 friends.
Right, nice.
That's a lot of friends.
Yeah, a lot of friend envy. Dom, what are you doing for the final?
Well, I'm working on the morning, but I'll be watching it somewhere in the evening. I'm slightly annoyed that having put up with some of the worst English performances when my time covering them, that I don't actually get to go to this game. But there you go. That's what happens.
Were you at all the group stage games then?
No. I mean back in the past.
Oh, right.
As in, you know, enduring McLaren and Capello and the like.
To what extent do you have that trepidation, having been here, not at least 3 years ago, but on various occasions in the past?
I'm strangely not concerned now. I think there's a lot of faith in this squad. I've actually always retained a lot of faith in this manager as well. So I don't go into this game with a sense of trepidation, really. I mean, what will be, obviously, and the Spanish are excellent, but this feels like an England team with momentum now.
Liam?
Where will I be watching it?
Oh, yeah, go on.
I'll probably be in the office unless someone sends me. I've put my hand up to the call for people about to do something possibly weird or watch it from a strange location. So right. I might be underground somewhere in East London or something.
Okay, because Tim Spears, for example, is being sent to Benidorm.
I quite enjoy that. I wasn't aware, but that's good fun, that's also very on brand.
Yeah.
You could be lying, but that makes sense. So.
No, that's very true. That is brilliant.
Maybe so.
Absolutely brilliant.
We're looking forward to hearing what results from that. But one man who's going to be watching the game in Berlin is the author of England: The Official History, our big friend Daniel Storey, and he joins us now. Daniel Storey, heading to the game. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of on a high from the semi-final. I hope that doesn't change whatever happens on Sunday, because I didn't think at the start of the tournament England would get to the final. I certainly didn't think after the group stage and the last 16 and the quarters that it would happen. And yet somehow this team seems to roll on, and also has created this window of potential whereby we don't really know the best they can play yet. And that makes them a dangerous final opponent, I think.
We've been here before, Daniel. Is this different?
I think England will be better for the experience. I think the scenario of that final, the kind of heady atmosphere of what it was like around Wembley that day, everything seemed to get a little bit too much. You want to rise into a final, but there becomes a point, I think, where the kind of whipped up pressure ends up making people too tense. And I think that's happened to England already in this tournament. Gareth Southgate's spoken about players feeling very nervous in the group stage because they're expected to win. And I think they were definitely expected to win that Euro final, particularly because it was at Wembley. I think Sunday is different. Spain are clear favourites. Spain have been the best team in the tournament. Gareth has already spoken about them having an extra day's rest. So it does take on a different connotation. So yes, I do think it will be different, but it will also be harder because Spain are a better team than Italy were at that point, I think.
I think so too. Daniel, before the tournament, you said that this was actually a worse England team than 3 years ago. Have you revised that opinion? And in what way do you think they might be better?
I have revised that opinion. I think at the time it was still valid. This isn't pure hindsight. There were issues within that team and the way that team were playing that seemed, if not unsolvable, then certainly significant enough to paint the tournament slightly grey from an England point of view, I think. That's changed because without wanting to pile too much pressure on England's youngest ever starter in a semi-final, the midfield balance looks completely different with Kobbie Mainoo in there. And the shift of formation has aided that. Declan Rice, ever since that change of formation, and even before England actually did it, Declan Rice has spoken over and over. Every time you speak to him, he says, I'm just getting more time, more space, more options on the ball in this formation. That has changed things significantly. And we've done it without a fit left wing back and a natural right wing back, which is remarkable, really. So that has made me change. And also the way in which the fringe players in this squad have stepped up during the tournament, which it's not that I didn't think that would happen, but it surprised me in the way it has. You know, Eberechi Eze has flourished as a left wing back. Ollie Watkins has come and scored a goal. Cole Palmer is an international novice and has done what he needs to do when he came in. Mark Gahey filled in for Harry Maguire, and then Ezri Konsa filled in for Mark Gahey. I didn't see that happening because the mood around the team didn't feel quite right. And the final thing to say on that is that most of that change is down to the manager, who is somehow, for all the criticism he gets, able to relieve the pressure on those players. When they play badly, he says it's his fault. When he plays well, it says that they're playing well. And that does himself a disservice because that becomes the kind of narrative in the national consciousness, I think. But he has done superbly well during this tournament.
Okay. A lot of that is his job, but he has done it well.
It is his job. You're absolutely right. And that's an important thing to say because we shouldn't just as I think people gave him too much stick, we shouldn't over praise before a final. It is his job and it's an excellent set of players. But from where England were and from where people thought Gareth Southgate was, I think this is still a surprise. And the criticisms of him before this tournament were around mixing things up in game and changing the mood mid-tournament. And he's done both of those things. And I'm a big, as you well know, I'm a big Southgate defender. I'm a Southgate apologist, but I don't feel like I need to apologise anymore. And that's been the best thing about this tournament for me.
Good Lord. Daniel, on a similar theme, for so long, England missing out and kind of a Smith-like commitment to miserablism has been a core part of maybe your identity, maybe the identity of a lot of England supporters, the kind of years of hurt as a badge of pride. If England win on Sunday, what will you do?
It will be a deeply weird sensation, and it will be one of those things, and I think we've all had them as supporters of clubs because it's more likely to happen then, in that you don't just remember the next day or the day after that. It's months down the line you remember, oh yeah, that happened. And that will continue to happen for England supporters if they win. But it will also create this magnificent honeymoon period that just allows everyone to take a huge sigh of relief and this kind of exhalation of we don't need to stack up the baggage anymore. I'm sorry for talking about my own club team, but as a supporter of someone who spent 20 years outside the Premier League and most of those trying to get back there, like it weighs you down, history. There's no way that England players would have played as they had in the group stage of this tournament if they'd won the tournament 3 years ago, put it that way. There would have been a freedom of expression that comes with success. So that's the big hope, that it's not necessarily a springboard, because we've seen in international football over the last decade or so that it doesn't really work that way. Italy rise and fall, Germany rise and fall. But even if it doesn't mean anything for the future, it just solves so much of that past angst and allows us to watch a team with this kind of upbeat freedom again.
Daniel Storey. Well, that all sounds nice, doesn't it? England, to be in this final, pretty extraordinary. How many times they've come within seconds of elimination. They needed the overhead miracle against Slovakia from Jude Bellingham. They needed penalties against Switzerland. That last-ditch strike last time out from Ollie Watkins, and a highly debatable penalty against Netherlands. Is it a good thing or a bad thing, do you think, to reach the final in this way, Jay?
I think over the course of a Premier League season, a 38-game season, we often say that sometimes the sign of a champion is being able to pull out those last-minute goals. But actually, if you're a bit over-reliant on that, that's a negative. But I think because it's only 7 games at a tournament, you can sort of get away with it a little bit more. You don't have to be amazing. You can kind of grind your way through, which is what England have done. Whereas if this was a 38-game league, England would get caught out at one point. It certainly makes things very tense and nervous for the rest of us. But then when it goes right, it makes it very exciting. But I think we will have to play a little bit better against Spain to get the job done. And admittedly, that first half against the Netherlands, there was definitely a 20-minute spell after we conceded where we looked really, really good. So if we kind of replicate that, then I'll be positive.
If this was a 24-nation league, and I'm not giving you away for any example, where do you think England would have finished?
Top 4?
Top 4, yeah, it seems fair. I mean, talent-wise, England more than match up with, I think, almost anybody there. Even if you take Spain, Dom, who would you, if you do that, make an 11 out of England and Spain, who would you take from Spain to put in the England 11? A left-back, potentially, depending on...
Yeah, I mean... Well, actually, I definitely find a way of getting Rodri in there. He would sit quite nicely alongside Declan Rice. I'm not sure about the left back situation, because I think if Luke Shaw is fit and playing, I'd probably take him over Mark Cucurella still. Maybe that's my Premier League bias coming in, but I think that when you look at the forward ranks as well, I mean, you could argue that the two wingers have been more consistent for Spain in this tournament than England's 10s. They've shown flashes, Foden and Bellingham definitely, but Williams and Yamal have been outstanding, and Danny Olmo has been pretty useful himself as well. So combined 11s, yeah, there would be lots of Spanish players in there for their individual brilliance. I just hope that the collective nature of what England are doing, and the fact that they're getting better and they are clicking and they are finding a balance slowly in over the course of the tournament, helps them out on Sunday, and that may be the difference.
Would you agree with that, Lou?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. There's probably more similarities as a collective now than there's probably ever been between sort of Spain and England. I think there's an interesting parallel when you look at De La Fuente and Southgate both coming in from 21s roles, and how they've both been then very prepared to bring sort of young players through. That's one thing Southgate was saying about Manu before the tournament, was like, we've never been shy to bring through a young player. It's just making sure now we don't bring them through too early, rather than before it's probably when it's a bit too late. But they've become a great counter-attacking team now that can play really, really vertically. They're one of the top teams, I think, for counter-attacking chances at the tournament, which obviously been historically quite an English way of playing. They're still really good at pressing and building up, but you look at some of their goals. The first one against Croatia is a great example of the way they can sort of hurt England, because there were times in the second half of that Netherlands semi-final where, and there's one specific instance in my brain where Walker makes a great recovery tackle on Cody Gakpo, but they are a little bit stretched, and sometimes you have to when you're pushing forward, and that's part of the game. But the sort of risk you can take against other teams compared to Spain, I think you have to give a little bit more respect to the individual quality in terms of their technical ability and their pace, especially out wide.
So have you looked at how Spain can hurt England, and what ways England can do that to the Spanish as well, or likely to?
Well, I mean, the ways they can hurt is obviously that they had the perfect group stage. They've won every game, haven't they? Sort of coming into this, but it's in a weird situation where normally it's a team that Gareth Southgate hasn't beaten before. Obviously, arguably, his best half of football as an England coach was the half when they beat Spain 3-2 and went 3-0 up and were 3-0 up by half time. A lot of those players have sort of changed. It's sort of a slightly different forward combination now. There's not quite the Sterling and the Rashford that was there in that front three, where you used to be able to sort of say they could just sort of go play on their own. Now you're looking at being a team that likes to sort of combine a lot more. So there's also threats there. I thought the best part of the first half against the Netherlands, and you'll possibly get this again, was the fact that England having sort of a midfield four and those narrow number 10s close to Kane, is that you can overwhelm a midfield three when they just can't pick everyone up, or they're forcing centre-backs to step out, midfielders to drop in. Some of England's combinations there were really good.
Do you think that they could overwhelm the Spanish midfield?
I think numerically, I mean, it's obviously, you've got some of the best players in the world there, especially Rodri as a defensive midfielder, but you look at the balance they've got, and Southgate was saying about, I think Asif Menu was, like, if this was his breakout game or his breakout tournament after the Netherlands game, he was saying that every game's been at a really high level, and specifically having that profile that Southgate says England haven't had for a long time, where he can take it, he can turn. And there was a whole 90-second video I saw of his and Foden's like interchanges and passing together. The way that Foden, kind of plays this repeat move now, where he's sort of in that right side pocket, takes it on his back foot on the left foot, either to try and shoot or to try and pass now. So yeah, England have definitely got ways to hurt them. I think the switches of play will be important as well. You're playing against a back four, so you can overload them if you can get the wing backs in behind. And you might look at sort of Saka against Cucurella. I think if that is the matchup as a duel, you could win 1v1.
Okay. That 3-2 was back in 2018 in the Nations League.
So obviously not De La Fuente.
Not De La Fuente. England and Spain haven't actually met at a major tournament since, Jay, do you know?
Possibly Euro 96.
Euro 96, the quarter-final.
At least half of this podcast weren't alive then.
No, I was 95.
Oh,
So
fair enough.
if that makes you
Yeah.
feel a little bit better.
Dom, do you remember? Well, I think the goalless draw is the less important part of how that game turned out. It was a goalless draw, and then it went to the penalty shootout, which had two really kind of standout moments. No.
Well, Pierce's goal and the redemption from Italia 90 is the one that everybody remembers. But do you remember the other Spaniard who missed that day?
So the first miss, I can't recall who that was.
Fernando Hierro, no.
It was Hero. And then the last one, which was decisive, up steps Miguel Angel, and that was Rafa Nadal's uncle. Wow. And Killing Me Softly was number one by the Fugees.
Good
just if
tune,
you want a bit
good
of
vibes.
context. Yeah. I say haven't met in a major final. The two nations did meet in the under-21 Euro final last summer. And a couple of this three-line squad were involved in that game.
Yeah. So Cole Palmer and Anthony Gordon started. I think I'm right in saying Anthony Gordon won the player of the tournament.
Slightly controversially, but yeah.
And
Why controversially?
He was good, but a lot of people said he scored a few goals in the groups and wasn't phenomenal in the knockouts. Thought he had a great tournament, sort of played false nine and was a big reason why he had such a great season for Newcastle. But yeah, I think a lot of people kicked off, as they always do.
And then I think the only member of Spain's under-21 team that's in this squad is Alex Baena. Yamal was too busy being the top scorer of the under-17 Euros.
Under-17.
He can still play that now, right?
Exactly.
He's still eligible.
Yeah, let's just not mention that.
Incredible. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Yamal now and Spain. If England have ridden their luck a bit so far, Spain have been relentless, winning all their games, beating Croatia, Italy, Germany and France along the way. How confident, though, are they about facing England? What are the big questions that are dominating their build-up? Here's Pol Ballús. Pol Ballús. Pol, how is Spain feeling about Sunday?
Spain are feeling quite well, quite optimistic. I think that football-wise, the team has given reasons to the media and to the fans just to feel optimistic and to feel that they probably are the better team in this final and possibly the main favourites. And I think that, just watching the semi-final and seeing Lamine Yamal, seeing Nico Williams on earlier rounds, Rodri, who's been dominating throughout all the games. I think that Spain has a lot of reasons to be optimistic and to feel that they can go all the way in these Euros.
A lot of those players being talked up in the English press, of course, have been marvelling at their performances. Who are the Spanish press talking about as the big England danger men?
I think that without the shadow of a doubt, this is Jude Bellingham. Just for the impact that he's had at Real Madrid this season, the way that he's behaved, and what he's shown in these Euros, where probably he's not at his best, or he's not been a constant threat, but just the leadership, just the ability to appear in crunch moments. It's basically all what as Spanish fans or media are just rating the most from this English side. But at the same time, I think that when you listen to all the players when they are being asked about England, they know that England is possibly the most talented squad in these Euros, playing in such big teams, such highly rated, and they know the sort of talent that England has. So I'd say that inside the team, they are quite aware of what England is capable to, despite all the criticism that they face throughout the tournament. And I think that the Southgate side is not gonna be afraid of being pragmatic, which is something that can hurt this Spanish team.
They're also a team that maybe hasn't flexed its muscles fully yet in this tournament. We were talking a little bit before, Paul, about which Spanish players would get into the England team. Off the top of your head, which English players would you swap a Spanish player out for?
Without a shadow of a doubt, the first one is Harry Kane, because possibly Spain, as much as Alvaro Morata is a good fit for this team, he's not a world-class striker. And I think that Kane, in my opinion, is the best number 9 in the world, so would fit straight into this team. Possibly Jude Bellingham too. Apart from this, I know that Phil Foden is full of talent. Bukayo Saka is amazing player. But in terms of the chemistry of the dressing room, the roles, how everything is distributed, even Cucurella who has not been like a regular the whole season at Chelsea. I think that he's the perfect fit for this team. Maybe I would get John Stones as well as a starter in this Spanish side, because as much as Aymeric Laporte has been great, he probably would appreciate like a partnership like John Stones. But apart from that, I don't think that, as much talented as the English players are, like the role distribution and the harmony between those group of players here in Spain just makes so much sense that I don't think that I would touch that much.
Okay. You mentioned Alvaro Morata. Will he be fit for the final, Paul?
Yeah. He's expected to be fit, and he's expected to start the most important game of his international career. He's possibly like the most loved character in the dressing room, despite all the criticism that he's faced from even the Spanish media. I think that without a shadow of a doubt, he is going to start, and he's going to be a fundamental piece for Luis de la Fuente.
Okay, Dani Carvajal, I imagine, will come back in at right back.
Yeah, Dani Carvajal is going to come in at right back, and possibly the biggest doubt is on the centre-back partnership. Aymeric Laporte is going to start, and then it's in between Robin Lenormand or Nacho. I think that Lenormand is going to start because he's been De La Fuente's guy since the qualifiers. He's there all the time, and he's just going to trust his people. But if some defensive reinforcement is needed, and for that, Nacho is going to come in as the first sub.
Paul, 6 wins out of 6. Does that mean everything's sorted for Spain, or are there any questions that are being raised, any worries that the Spanish press, for example, have ahead of Sunday?
Yeah, no, they have their own worries, of course. I was talking about Alvaro Morata. His name has been, I'm not going to say questioned, but his form hasn't been the greatest in these Euros. And there's been talks as well like about the centre-back partnership, but so far so good. I think that the results that Lenormand and Laporte have shown are great. And in that regard, I would say that, this is it. At the start of the Euros, there were doubts over the partnership of Rodri in midfield. But I think that Fabian Ruiz has been like one of the best performers by a mile in these Euros. So I think that apart from this, everything is pretty much sorted. Okay,
and you also have at your disposal the breakout star of the tournament, Lamine Yamal, who's going to have a coming of age quite literally this weekend, because he's actually got his birthday on Saturday.
Yeah, he's going to turn 17, a bit better maybe to make it to the squad. But no, I'm sure that he is going to be a starter. He's a man who's born for the occasion. He loves to play in big games, as he showed in the semi-finals. He's being the big name. All the talks around the game on Sunday are like turning around Lamine Yamal and like what he's shown in these Euros. Because apart from the game at the semi-finals, which I'm sure that is going to be remembered as the Lamine Yamal game for sure, I think that he's been brilliant like overall the competition. He's delivered assists in all like the phases of the competition, and how like Spain relies on him as being like possibly the biggest attacking threat that they have. Just like, tells you that he doesn't feels too much the pressure. He plays without thinking too much. He's not really aware of the consequences of what he's doing. Is that the best thing he has for sure?
Magnificent. Paul, thank you so much, and enjoy the final on Sunday.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Paul Ballús. Lamine Yamal, top assister in the competition, and he's still only 16, which is just silly, really. For all we can talk about this, that, and the other, when you've got a player like that, a generational, what looks to be a generational star, does that kind of throw all the other calculations a little bit out the window, potentially?
Can create something out of nothing. I think obviously Paul mentioned the goal and the assists, and I think he's created 11 open play chances, which is more than any other Spanish player at the tournament. And I think the way he kind of sat down Rabiot the other day, and obviously what Rabiot had said before the game, added to the theatre of it all. But it's just a player who's extremely intelligent. And so often when young players kind of burst onto the scene, you find them to be quite rash with their decision making. They're exceptionally quick. They're very skillful. But 9 times out of 10, they just basically want to kick and rush. They want to run down the wing, beat as many players as possible. And I think what makes Yamal stand out is that he seems to know when's the right time to slow things down, when's the right time to pop the ball off. And it's sort of just, how do you prepare to mark somebody who's that young, has not been around for a long period of time, so there's maybe not as many examples of how teams have contained and stopped him. It just must be a little bit confusing. You must be, I remember Theo Hernandez at one point for France, I think sort of just clattered into him. He's probably just thinking, I'm not letting this 16-year-old embarrass me. But obviously, whatever England do with the left wing back, if it is Trippier, if it's Shaw, they're going to have a massive task on their hand dealing with him. And I think, like Pol said, he's so young, he doesn't really know what the consequences of his failure are. And I think that's sort of the beauty of it. We are just looking at somebody who's free, young-spirited, literally young, and just enjoying themselves. So I wish the best of luck to him throughout his whole career, but I hope he doesn't turn up on Sunday, if I'm honest.
Dom, are you looking forward to seeing him on Sunday or dreading it a bit?
No, he can't fail but look forward to seeing it. I mean, it's wonderful to watch such a young talent taking a tournament by storm. I love watching the three of them. I think Olmo, as I said earlier, has been absolutely sensational in his own way, and Nico Williams is lightning quick and skillful on the other flank. They are a great trio. If they, as Pol says, if they had Harry Kane in form ahead of them, they'd probably score a lot more goals than they have, and they've scored a fair few as it is. So it's a frightening prospect, but I do think that the fact that they're in that team means that Spain will be slightly more open, and if you can find a way of nullifying Rodri in that midfield, and moreover the partnership that he's got with Fabian Ruiz, if you can unsettle that, then maybe there will be space for England to exploit.
All right. Liam, with your magnetic coloured dots and your whiteboards, if you were Gareth Southgate...
I do actually have one.
Do you have
Yeah.
one? If you were Gareth Southgate, what would you do on Sunday to negate the terrible Spain?
And quickly, where is your magnetic board in your house?
It's not like anywhere special. It's just in my room. Like it's not like hung up on the wall and I'm stood there like observing it from a distance. I probably use one on the laptop more than anything.
Okay. What have you done with the one on the laptop?
I'll just make a various amount of sort of different patterns to show if a team's pressing a certain way or building up.
What would you come up with were you the boss?
Ironically, I think it's knowing how you have to play the game. So I think having a strong defensive base is probably the most important part. I think there's a real balance to be struck between not sitting too deep, but also when you say, well, you have to look at where the super strengths are out wide. If you press too high and commit specifically as well your sort of fullbacks really aggressively or wing backs to the press, sure, you've probably got Kyle Walker's sort of pace on the right hand side where you could trust him to recover, but you're offering a real sort of advantage for Spain if you do leave those wingers sort of 1v1 and if you commit your midfielders too far and they can't get back in. So there's definitely a balance between sort of maybe starting off by pressing with quite a high squeeze. You want to get at them early when you're fresh, but also saying we can mix between that and maybe dropping into a 5-4-1 or a 5-3-2 and sort of retaining that threat on the break, because Spain are still maybe not quite as much as they were under Luis Enrique. They're going to want to keep the ball and sort of play through midfield. But then you have to be equally mindful that how we attack is very important. And I think going through the middle, through the number 10s, might not always be the safest route because they are so good on the break that you do go into Foden, into Bellingham in their feet. They're great. The positive is they can turn, they can attack, you can create. But the downside is they will have turnovers because they're creative players. They're going to lose the ball. They're going to get tackled by Rodri, insert other good Spanish defender here. And then you're risking the ball going the other way, off Morata, into the wingers. So it's England are going to need to be, and this will sound silly, but probably 8 or 9 out of 10 in sort of every phase of the game because Spain now are just so much more well-rounded. And the same in their build-up. I'd be amazed if Jordan Pickford doesn't send most of his kicks long with how good the Spain press is. Be amazed.
Okay. You mentioned freshness. How much do we think fatigue might be a factor? England have played an extra half hour compared to their opponents because they've done extra time twice. They've also been rotated less than De La Fuente. Stats show that of the 22 players that have played the most minutes at the Euros, none of them are from Spain, but 7 of the top 12 are from England. Plus, and I don't know how much this is a factor, but Spain have had an extra day's rest because their semi-final was before England's. And oh my goodness, I'm just reading now, at the previous 6 major tournaments, World Cup and Euros, the team that's played in the first semi-final has won the final. Jay.
Well, I think Southgate came out and said England won't really get the chance to train. So, I mean, the analysts are probably frantically preparing for Sunday's game and trying to work out what to do, but there's actually going to be very little time to implement it with the players. Of course, fatigue is going to be a factor. We saw a drop-off in the second half against the Netherlands, but there is one thing which I actually think maybe goes in England's favour over Spain. I know Spain won the Nations League last year, but I think this is their first major tournament final since 2012 when they won the Euros. And there have been times in this tournament, and the Slovakia game is probably the perfect example, where I think England managers, players of the past would have panicked at that stage of a international tournament. Whereas we've now got players who, so Kane, Walker, Stones, Pickford are the examples, who've been with Southgate pretty much since the beginning of his tenure. So they're very experienced. But then you've also got very young players. Bellingham and Saka are 21 and 22. But this is their third major international tournament. So this is a squad that's been at this stage of a competition before, and you'd like to think is going to be a little bit more accustomed than maybe some of the younger Spanish contingent about how to deal with that pressure. So England now know what it's like to lead a major tournament final, to be drawing, to be pegged back. And I think that'll be very important, because there's going to be times in the game where we're on top. There's going to be times where Spain are on top. And I think they'll just know how to mentally cope with that a little bit better.
All right. Dom, you said that you're not feeling any great nerves ahead of this game. Why do you think England might win?
I think a lot of the factors there that Jay's relayed, there is a level of experience in this England squad. They have been hurt by relative failure, as in losing a final, and in the past, getting to a final was seen as a magnificent achievement. But actually, I think it will sting the fact that they lost on the penalties in 2021 will sting the squad and drive them on. A lot of these guys will have tasted that firsthand. I think Southgate's record in tournaments is phenomenal. His level of experience as both player and manager is something else, and that is another factor. If we can't have faith in a manager's decision making when he's done this much in his career, then I don't think you're ever going to have faith in a national team manager. I also think that on the fatigue factor, and it is definitely a factor. It's going to be. If you look at the Spanish squad, they've all had game time in this tournament, bar the third choice goalkeeper, whereas England. Okay, 3 haven't got on the pitch yet, but I think there are options there for Southgate to explore, and the drop off isn't huge from taking off one of the first team starters to bringing on a substitute. I think you'll find that his substitutes will be earlier in this game, relating to the fact that the preparation time, the lack of preparation time. So I just think he's got a few options he can explore there, which can hurt the Spaniards.
All right, we shall see. Liam, what's the one key thing you're going to be watching out for on Sunday to give you a sense of which way it's going to go?
I think it's how both teams defend wide areas. You look at their strengths, both sides out. I mean, England less on the left and more so specifically the right-hand side. But yeah, it's going to be a battle of wingers. That's where the match winners are. All right.
Liam, thank you so much for being with us today. Jay, thank you as well for joining us. And Dom Fifield and Pol Ballús earlier on, and Daniel Storey. Liam and producer Charlie in the booth. You, listener, do enjoy the game. We'll be here right afterwards doing a totally on the YouTube channel, and then the podcast will drop thereafter. Fingers crossed for whichever team you're rooting for. From now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.